So you've accused Dick Durbin of lying about some of his correspondence with the IRS. What do you know that we don't know? Because all we've seen publicly so far is this letter that he says he's made public.
Sure, and we asked him specifically, is that the only correspondence that you had with the IRS during the period of the scandal investigation? And his answer was yes, that's the only. We went further. They had made the statement that was the only correspondence, and we asked if he wanted to stand by that or if he wanted to change that. He said no, absolutely, he would stand by that, that's it. And this was in the interview with your competitor this morning. We then produced an email that had gone from his campaign to the IRS in furtherance of that original letter. Unfortunately, Congress has exempted itself from FOIA so that we can't legally force him to give us any additional correspondence that he had with the IRS. But we've asked him to do so, and of course he is not cooperating.
What is the significance of that? I mean, just like kind of taking a step back here, I mean, obviously you're saying that he's lying.
Sure.
Okay,
right.
But beyond that, why do you think he is? What's the rest of this picture of this story?
Well, obviously we don't know. That's what we're trying to find out. That's the whole point of this. We'd like to know how much pressure he was putting on the IRS to look into conservative organizations, and that's why we've asked to see the other emails. But because we can't FOIA them, it's very difficult to get them. And obviously, if they're incriminating to him, he isn't going to want to give them to us.
So that whole premise, though, that Karl Rove has the Crossroads PAC, and that's what he wanted investigated to see if it truly was a not-for-profit. That whole concept, do you agree with that or not?
Look, the problem is that Dick Durbin has become a bully. He threatens to use government power against private individuals. I don't believe that he should use the IRS as a weapon against his political opponents, which is exactly what he was trying to do. And that's only one example. There's the other example of ALEC, which is an organization that tries to work with state legislators to provide generally conservative-oriented legislation. As it turned out, they had supported Stand Your Ground at one point, and after the Trayvon Martin incident, Mr. Durbin tried to make a big deal out of the fact that they had supported that, and that many of the companies who had contributed to ALEC weren't even aware of that, which I'm sure is correct. But that's not the issue. The issue is he then threatened those companies, asked them for a response to that, and then threatened to make those responses public, so that he was attempting to drive away any contributions to support what I think is a very good organization.
I mean, did he really follow through with the hearings and so forth?
Well, I don't know how many companies responded to that, so I don't know the answer to the question. But that's, again, just another instance. There's also an instance in Quincy, Illinois, where a radio station was running an ad that a PAC had placed. I had nothing to do with it, that explained that Dick Durbin pays his female staffers less than he pays his male staffers. I believe it was on average $11,000 less, and he didn't like that being out there. So he threatened to go to the Federal Communications Commission to have them investigate their licenses.
Now I know
it goes on more.
Well, I know the background on that story is the Washington Free Beacon, which is they say that they're a website, but they are a partisan website, right? So how much faith can we put into, they're the ones who reported that, how much faith can we put into that study? Durbin says that no, in fact, I have more women working for me and they make more salary on average than men. I mean, do you have facts that dispute that?
Yes, Natasha, we do. And to start with, I will point out that they have a female director from Chicago and a male from Springfield. Looking at their salaries for the last 6 full years, when we add it up, and we'll provide this, the male director from Springfield was paid $83,832 more than the female director from Chicago.
Are you sure she's not part-time?
Yes.
Okay. We'll have to look into that.
We will.
But so you think that
we'll provide you the background on that.
You believe it. So so here we sit in Oberweis Dairy on Sheffield Avenue. Durbin's called on you to disclose how many women work in your businesses in Oberweis Securities and Oberweis Dairy, you know, how much they're, who's the top 10 employees, how much are they paid? Will you be willing to disclose that?
Look, those are private businesses, and I don't run those businesses. My son Jim runs the asset management business. My son Joe runs the dairy business. I will tell you that some years ago, when I was more involved in running the dairy, of our 5 top officers in the company, I was the only male. The other 4 were all female.
And this was when?
It was 15 or 20 years ago.
And what was your role in hiring them?
I was involved in knowing who they were. Actually, one of those was my wife, and she was probably more involved in hiring those people, but I obviously had some approval of the hiring. And I will tell you that in our store division today, we have 4 regional managers. 2 are male and 2 are female. Many of our store managers are female. And many are African American too, by the way.
So
Look, fundamentally, I don't care about somebody's background. All I care about is how good of a job they do. If you work for Oberweis Dairy or you work for Oberweis Asset Management and you do a good job, you're going to be promoted, you're going to be paid more, you're going to be successful within our company.
But do you make a conscious effort to make sure there is diversity, both racially and ethnically,
I would say,
and gender-based?
You know, I would say we pay more attention to what kind of a job people do. Having said that, though, we certainly are very diverse, both ethnically and male versus female.
You're making more visits to the South Side. You've had a couple of African American clergymen who've supported you. What would you say have you made inroads there? How often do you campaign on the South Side?
We spent a lot of time on the South Side. You're probably aware that Pastor Corey Brooks started his Brothers on the Block program to try to reduce violence in Chicago. And he was trying to get together 5,000 men to come out on Friday nights to stand on the 500 higher crime corners. I was out on the corner of 79th and Cottage Grove 5 times, handing out not only my literature, but also, you know, reduce the violence information. And I wasn't there for 10 minutes. After I did it, and there was a little in the press about it, I think Pat Quinn came out, was there for 10 minutes while the cameras were there, and then gone. In my case, I've been out for 1, 2, or 3 hours. And I will tell you, I have been amazed at how friendly the people are in that neighborhood. If you picture this, you know, standing out in the middle of the street when there's a red light, trying to hand out the information to everybody, and everybody's rolling down their windows, take the information. I will say the first night, a couple of people said, "I don't think I've ever seen a white Republican here before. But thank you, I appreciate your coming, and I'm going to vote for you." And we keep hearing that kind of message over and over. People have been very receptive. And I will tell you that tomorrow morning we're going to be opening our first campaign office on the South Side at, I believe the address is 6607 South Martin Luther King Drive.
You are opening a campaign office on the South Side.
And so has Bruce Rauner as well, by the way. He has one on 79th. And the Republican Party has opened 3. And I was at all 3 of those openings. One, not just the South Side, South and West. And I will tell you, at every one of those openings, we had excited people from the neighborhood who were delighted to see offices being opened by Republicans in areas that had not had Republican offices before. These are people who are excited to go out. They want to be election judges. They're willing to go out door to door. They're willing to do whatever they can to get involved, learn more about the process, to get some competition going between Republicans and Democrats. Democrats have taken their votes for granted for way too many years. And what has it gotten them? Nothing. Competition is the best possible solution, because when there's competition, it means that Republicans will have to listen to what their concerns are, as will Democrats. And it means that Republicans can offer their solutions, Democrats can offer their solutions, and then voters can choose, well, I like this Republican, I like that Democrat, and I'm going to vote for them. And as they do that, they will gain voting power, because both parties then will have to compete for those votes.
So your opponent said, hey, if my opponent wants to wage this campaign in the African American communities of the state, feel free.
We are.
He
We're waging it in
feels-
every part of this state.
So, what about minimum wage? It's polled really well in Illinois. There's an advisory referendum on the ballot. There seems to be some gaining traction with this issue. What is your position on raising the minimum wage in Illinois?
Are you aware that I filed a bill to raise the minimum wage in Illinois?
You did, but it was only for if you were 26 years old and older?
Sure. Here's the problem. The CBO, a nonpartisan Washington group, looked at what would happen if we raised the minimum wage across the country. They found that 900,000 people would be moved from below the poverty line to above the poverty line. That's good. We'd all like to see that happen. But they also found that 500,000 people would lose their jobs. So there are going to be winners and losers under that. Under my proposal, the losers would be much smaller. The people who would be hurt by Durbin's proposal are teenagers, and especially minority teenagers. Under my proposal, which says that, people have to begin paying for their own insurance at age 26. They're no longer eligible to be under their parents' plan. They can then, they will by that age have some job experience, and they would be entitled to the higher minimum wage, which would go to $9.50, and then 10 over the next 3 years. That way, teenagers who are entering the workforce who desperately need a job to get started and to learn basic skills wouldn't be put out of a job by that plan, but older workers would receive the benefits of a higher minimum wage. I thought that was the best of both worlds. The Democrats wouldn't let us debate that. Mr. Durbin, again, is trying to mislead the public, saying I'm against higher minimum wages, and that's obviously not the case. I want to do whatever we can to help the voters of Illinois, to help the poor and middle class of Illinois. Mr. Durbin's policies, as we know, have been killing the poor and middle class here in Illinois. Just since the last time he ran for office, the average income of an Illinois family has declined by $5,053. What we know is his policies aren't working. He's been in Washington for 32 years. It's time to change direction.
So if this referendum passes overwhelmingly, let's say.
Unfortunately, it's meaningless. It's just a referendum. It has no weight.
But would you vote for it? Yes, it has no weight. On the other hand, they say it gives politicians political coverage in Springfield to vote for it. Would you vote in favor of it?
I'd like to discuss my plan, which I think is much better because it won't hurt minority teenagers. We already have very high unemployment
your
rates.
argument is it would hurt minority teenagers because
they'd lose jobs. They would have no
jobs.
access to jobs.
Okay. Going back to some of the, African American neighborhoods and investment, you're opening a campaign office. What about Oberweis Dairies? Do you have any in
Campaign office?
Do you have any Oberweis Dairies on the south or west side of the city?
Sure. Actually, we have one at 95th and Kedzie, which has been a great store for us. And by the way, I had no idea, but Pastor Corey Brooks asked me to check. And if I remember correctly, I think it was 22 out of 30 employees of that store were African American, and our manager is African American. We also have a store on Torrance. And again, I think it's, if I remember right, 16 out of 22 employees are African American, and the manager is African American. It wasn't something that I knew, but when he asked, I got the information for him.
Do you see any future plans to expand?
Yes, we're expanding in about 2 weeks, as a matter of fact.
In those areas?
Actually, we've had some conversations with Pastor Brooks. He is hoping to build a community development center on the lot where the former infamous motel was located, which he managed to raise enough funds to tear down. It's now a vacant lot. He has wanted to have something there that would be perhaps a training center or an ice cream store where people could learn basic skills for jobs. I have told him that I will, again, I'm not running the business, my son is running the business, but I've told him that I will strongly encourage my son to try to make an attractive opportunity to do that, perhaps by granting him or someone who would run it a franchise for that location for free as a test to see how that would work out. Something along that. Nothing is definite or agreed upon, but yes, I want to help. One of the problems of the community is a shortage of jobs, and they want to know how can we help create jobs. That was one of the ideas that we were looking at. And obviously, education is another very key issue. I believe very strongly in school choice. I believe that competition among schools ends up with a better education for everybody. If I could suddenly have a law passed so that only Oberweis ice cream could be sold in Illinois, well, that'd be wonderful for me. We'd make a lot of money, but probably our ice cream wouldn't be quite as good after a period of time. Our customer service wouldn't be quite as good, and our prices would probably go up because we wouldn't have to compete. It's competition that makes us strive for the very best ice cream, the very best customer service, and to keep our prices as competitive as possible.
Do you support school vouchers as well then?
Absolutely, and that's about what I was going to say. Competition among schools makes the educational process better, just like it does in the private sector. And in Washington, D.C., there was a program, I forget what it was called, like a incentive scholarship program, I believe it was. And in that program, the money followed the student. So if the student went to School A got the money. If they went to School B got the money. If they went to School C got the money. And the advantage of that was schools are all competing because they want the money to provide a better education. And if they don't do well, they're going to go out of business, and a new school is going to come in and take their place. So I think it was a great program. It was particularly helping minority youth in Washington, D.C., and Dick Durbin killed that program. Why? Because he is so incredibly heavily influenced by the union bosses who like having a monopoly. They don't like having to compete.
All right, well, let's shift gears a little bit here. On Friday...
Oh, I like that gear. Let's stay there.
On Friday, you have Herman Cain coming to
Yes.
headline a fundraiser for you.
Yes.
I saw an email your campaign sent out, and you said that you have much in common with Herman Cain. What do you have in common with him?
Well, I think a belief in the worth and the integrity of individual initiatives. I think that we both believe that, and I would put Pastor Corey Brooks in the same category. We've had some conversations, and he said things like, government can help get programs started, they can provide some incentive, but ultimately, we all have to take responsibility for ourselves. We have to take responsibility for helping people, for making things work, and for moving forward.
But back to Herman Cain, obviously sex scandals ended up sidetracking his candidacy for president. What is your opinion on that?
I honestly have no knowledge, no facts. I don't know what was going on. Obviously, he's denied that, so I don't know. He's a successful businessman. That would be something else that I would have in common with him. And he's...
But does it concern you that more than one woman came out and said that he was... accused him of sexual misconduct?
You know what? People accuse... When you get into the political world, and I will tell you, firsthand, people accuse you of all kinds of things that aren't true. Nothing was proved in that area. So I tend to take him at his word.
And there was a discussion earlier today about whether you're a member of the Tea Party. You said, I am not a member of the Tea Party. But you do believe that the country's a better place for them.
Look, I believe that my understanding, and I've been to a few Tea Party meetings, my understanding is that members there typically are people who have not been involved in politics but who are concerned about the future of our country. They're concerned about too much government. They're concerned about too high a taxes. And they're concerned about the educational opportunities for their kids and for the kids to have a good job. Those are the things that I'm concerned about. Those are the things most Americans are concerned about. So for Dick Durbin to somehow try to vilify people who are concerned about their families, who are concerned about government, is absolutely ridiculous.
Going back to Dick Durbin and the bullying that you mentioned, let's just go back to that quickly, because when I talked to him, he called you a walking tax inversion because of the homestead exemption, your wife living in Florida, and so forth. Can you please explain?
Sure. I mean,
what's going on with the taxes?
This is more Dick Durbin nonsense. Dick Durbin is a slick politician. He's a bully. He will try to threaten anybody and try to get away from his sorry record. The record of the last 6 years is the average family in Illinois has lost $5,053 in earnings power. That's what he doesn't want to talk about. That's what he doesn't want to hear about. So he'll say anything he can to divert attention.
But can you just explain quickly why you claimed homestead in Florida rather than in Illinois?
Because it's the law. The law is, and I didn't know that until we bought the home, you're not allowed to have two exemptions. I assumed initially that my wife could have the exemption on her property and I could have the exemption on my property, the home that I've been in for 37 years. I mean, this guy tried to accuse me of not being an Illinoisan. I have 5 children, 4 of whom live in Illinois. I have 2 stepchildren, both of whom live here in Chicago. I have 19 grandchildren, 14 of whom live in Illinois, and I've been in the same house for 37 years.
So why not make your wife claim Illinois as an exemption?
When we bought that, she claimed the exemption in Florida. I'm not sure, but I believe the homestead exemption in Florida is a little bigger than the homestead exemption in Illinois. So it made logical sense to let her claim the exemption, which means I pay more Illinois taxes. So Illinois benefits because I pay higher taxes.
But then she pays lower taxes.
Yes.
Okay.
It's real estate taxes. Yep.
Lower real estate taxes.
Yep.
But then that benefits you too, right?
Well, this is a second marriage for us. We've been married for 7 years now, and we do keep separate finances.
You do keep separate, okay.
Yeah.
Going back to fundraising, you've donated some money to your campaign. I believe it's about $1 million.
Yes.
How much more are you willing to put in for your own investment?
We'll have to see as the campaign goes on.
Should we expect more?
I think you can expect more, yes. But understand, Durbin has gotten over $9 million in special interest money from lobbyists and other people promoting special legislation.
Do you find that you're getting support among other Republicans, particularly Mark Kirk, who said in the beginning, he seemed a little waffling that he was going to back you. Were you insulted by that?
No, look, I believe that Senator Durbin did help Mark during his physical challenge, let's say, for a period of time, and I think Mark appreciated that. So he was a little taken aback when he was asked the question, but that changed very quickly. He's been very supportive, very helpful. He did a fundraiser for me here in Chicago. When I was in Washington, he's introduced me to other people and made other suggestions. We've worked together very well, and we'll continue to work together when I'm in Washington and make him the senior senator instead of the junior senator.
You last spoke to each other a couple weeks ago. Do you have any campaign events scheduled together?
Not specifically just the two of us, but I'm sure that I will see him at additional campaign events, as I have regularly in the past.
What about Bruce Rauner? Have the two of you, have your campaigns coordinated in any way or discussed Republican strategy overall in the state? Or?
Look, I think it is critical that we elect a Republican governor in November. It's critical for the future of the state. I hear all the time from people, man, this is it. If you and Bruce Rauner are elected, I'm staying. If you guys both lose, I'm gone. And it's not just people, it's businesses as well. People are just holding on. They're fed up with what has been happening in our state. If Bruce Rauner is elected governor, we'll at least have some balance in Springfield with a totally Democratic-controlled legislature, and Republicans may gain some seats, but we're not going to gain control of the legislature. That would be balanced by a Republican governor who has the ability to appoint some more business-oriented department heads and bring the state under better control. Same thing is true in Washington, by the way. If I get elected as a Republican senator, there's a very high probability that Republicans will have control of the Senate, so that we'll have control of the legislative side, can pass the legislation, but that'll be offset by a Democrat president who we'll have to negotiate with or work with, or he can veto the legislation.
If you are, you believe in term limits, I take it?
Absolutely.
And you've talked about Durbin being in Washington for
32 years.
You've run for many offices unsuccessfully. You were just elected to
Well, hang on, we say unsuccessfully. I've never come in less than second, even though in some cases there were 5 candidates, 8 candidates, and some very good candidates, other state senators, people who've headed billion-dollar companies, and one who became the head of the state party, and people who spent 2 and 3 and 4 times as much on their campaigns as I did.
If you lose in November, would you run again for another office?
I have no intention to lose. I really think people of Illinois are ready for a change. 32 years is enough.
Would you limit yourself to how many terms then?
2.
And what about in the state Senate, where you now currently hold office? pretend that November is not happening. What's your self-imposed limit?
I believe that we should pass a constitutional amendment that would limit state senators and state representatives to 8 years in Springfield. I was a strong supporter of the bill that, unfortunately, Mike Madigan got killed. I think it would have been wonderful for the people of Illinois to be able to vote on that and to express their belief in term limits.
Well, what do you say to people who think it's disrespectful that you're only there for a year and you're passing through? You want something higher, and the state General Assembly is not good enough. Why isn't it good enough for you?
No, actually, I've served 2 years in Springfield, and quite frankly, a number of people asked me to run for the Senate seat because it is critically important that we replace Mr. Durbin, and they felt I was the strongest candidate to replace Dick Durbin.
So it's not that you're taking it for granted?
Absolutely not.
Rahm Emanuel just proposed decriminalizing marijuana and other small amounts of controlled substances statewide. He's trying to put together something to present in Springfield. Is that something you would support?
One thing that we know is we have too many people in jail from drug offenses, and it's particularly a problem in the African American community. There are obviously African American communities, I don't know the numbers, but something like 15% of the population of Illinois, but account for 50% or something like that of the prison population. That tells you there's something that's not right, and we really need to figure out what that is. And possibly it's because of the criminalization or prison terms for use of minor drugs, nonviolent crimes like that. Maybe there are better solutions. Maybe some type of plan or procedure that will help educate people and get them out of drugs is better than prison sentences. I don't know. I'm open on it. I would listen to it. I'd like to hear more discussion.
And I know that your position on immigration has evolved, and you've said in the past that you regret some of the statements you've made in the past, or the way you said it. Is that correct?
The way we said it, yes.
The way you said it. But
correct.
your position remains the same?
Look, my position is we've got to secure our borders so we know who is coming into this country. And it's not just from an immigration standpoint, it's also obviously from a terrorist standpoint. We must know get better control and know what's going on.
But Durbin this morning said, if we increase it anymore, they'll all be standing
Durbin says a lot of things
holding hands across the border.
It'll be another example of where he lied, obviously. I mean, that's complete, total, sheer
but
nonsense.
Isn't the border more secure than it's been in years?
Well, if you go from 0 to 5 miles an hour, are you speeding if the speed limit is 70? Answer is no. What I'm trying to say is it may be more secure than it was in years, but it's not secure. It's not even remotely secure. And that's part one. Part two, I think it's also important that we recognize that kids who have grown up here, who were brought here as babies by their parents, I think it does make sense to give those kids who've lived here 10, 15 years and grown up and been a part of our culture a path to citizenship. That's the one thing that has changed in my mind over the last 10 years.
That sounds like the DREAM Act.
In some ways.
Something
like that, yes.
So and to that extent, do you agree with Dick Durbin?
I don't believe that we should provide amnesty for those who broke our laws. Kids, we don't blame kids for the faults of their parents, but I don't believe we should have amnesty for those who broke our laws. They should, if they want to apply for citizenship, that's fine. Go to the back of the line, apply just like anybody else.
So do you feel like you're getting any kind of warmth from the Hispanic community? I mean, obviously, that's one of the biggest populations in the state, certainly in Chicago.
Yes.
You've talked about African Americans.
Yes.
Have you mended fences with them?
Look, we've been talking to, campaigning with, listening to every group, not just Hispanics, not just African Americans, also Asians, Poles, Ukrainians, Greeks, everything, because we're all America. That's what America is about, coming together, understanding common problems, and doing the best we can to solve them.